Well, guys, the DNC is at it again, rigging democracy, making sure that there really isn't any. Oh, no, we can't trust the American people to make their own minds up when it comes to who they should be voting for. No, we've got to do that for them. What do I mean by this? Well, they have severely narrowed the field for who is going to be making the debate stage come December. The cutoff is in 10 days. Candidates have 10 days left in order to reach both of the arbitrary markers that the DNC has decided. And that actually eliminates over half the field. So we saw the debates go on in June and in July. We saw 21 candidates, I believe. Seth Moulton dropped out after the first round of debates in June. Governor Steve Bullock from Montana was able to make that second round in July. And in order to make those debates, candidates had to get one of two measurements to get in. They either needed to get 65,000 individual donors, or they needed to get 1% in at least two of their qualifying polls, DNC's qualifying polls. Now, this round of debates, they've upped the ante and they've said, now you need to get 130,000 unique individual donors and you need to get at least 2% in at least four of their qualifying polls. Now, that has whittled the field significantly. And the only people thus far who have qualified for this next debate, which the cutoff is in 10 days, they've got 10 more days to qualify. The qualifiers so far are Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Beto O'Rourke, Amy Klobuchar, and Andrew Yang. Everybody else, basically the DNC is saying, hang it up, close up shop, guys, you're done. Not because you decided you're done, not because your campaigns have actually lost momentum, not because you're getting less donors and you're seeing less support, but because we've decided, based on our arbitrary rules, that we're just not going to expose the American people to your message anymore. We're done hearing your message and we're going to move on. That's essentially what they've said to all the other candidates in the field. Now, this has disproportionately harmed certain candidates over others. You've got a few candidates on this list who have reached well over the 130,000 individual donor mark, but they haven't met the DNC's polling qualifications. Those candidates are Julian Castro, Tom Steyer, and Tulsi Gabbard. Now, looking at Tulsi Gabbard, she has reached well over the 130,000 individual donor threshold, which, by the way, is a better measurement for how a campaign is doing. That is how you know how a candidate is doing with the American public. How much support are they getting? That number is not arbitrary. It's not based on who picks up the phone and arbitrary polling samples and it's just who decides to say yes that day to taking a survey. That is a real hard number. The number of individual donors you get is real. It's a hard number. You cannot manipulate that number like you can polls. And Tulsi has received well over the 130,000. I believe she's over 170,000 individual donors. Yet the issue is she's only made one of their qualifying polls. Okay, she's only made one of the qualifying polls. But here's the thing. Guess how many polls Tulsi Gabbard has actually made over 2% in? 23. 23 polls. But the DNC has said 22 of those polls aren't certified. Wah, wah. Sorry, they're not certified. Now, the question you would ask is, well, okay, do they give us a list of the certified polls and the uncertified polls? Yes, they do. They told us in advance, these are the certified polls. These are the ones we're going to accept. Mostly. There was actually an incident where Andrew Yang thought he had received his fourth qualifying poll because it was on the list. And then the DNC got back to him and said, actually, we're not going to count that poll. Sorry, it is a technicality for whatever reason. And he was like, what? Why? Maybe you guys should be more transparent about this. And they say, well, we are. We tell you the list. But they don't tell you why they're certifying certain polls over other polls. They don't give us a reason why they've said, okay, yeah, The Economist and Suffolk University and Emerson, those are not going to be certified and qualified by us. But this other one, ABC, Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, they are qualified. These other ones are not. They don't tell us why certain polls are qualified and certain polls are not qualified. So you've got a candidate like Tulsi Gabbard, who has 23 polls claiming that she is polling above 2%. And the DNC looking at that list and saying, yeah, but only one of these qualifies for our arbitrary reasons. We don't tell you why. Julian Castro, who's also received over 130,000 donors, also has received 22 of the polls. He has gotten over the 2% threshold. But of the 22, only 3 of his polls qualify. So now he's closer to making the debate stage, and maybe in the next 10 days they will release more polls. They've only released, by the way, three of those polls since the last debate. You know, and Tulsi Gabbard killed Kamala Harris in the last debate, became the most searched candidate after the last debate, and they've only released 3 polls since the last debate. 3. That's it. So 3 qualifying polls. You know, other polls she's qualified, she's made the marks, but they're not qualified polls. So here you've got candidates who did really well in the second debate. Some of them, like Steve Bullock, it was his only chance because that was the only debate he made to shine. And then they don't even give them the opportunity to actually make the numbers because they're not releasing enough polls. And we don't know how many more are going to be released between now and August 28th, the cutoff day. We don't know. They're not telling us. They don't say, yes, this is the release date, the release schedule of these polls. They don't give us any information. And they're claiming that this is democracy. This is what they're doing. This is what they're trying to gaslight us into believing that, oh yeah, this is the democratic process this time. No. The reality of it is that they have already decided who they want to win the nomination. It is Joe Biden or maybe Kamala Harris, maybe Pete Buttigieg if all hell breaks loose and it's like, whoa, you know, American people really want a fresh face. We'll go with Buttigieg. He's also a big bought out candidate. They're definitely upset that Sanders, Warren, and Yang are even in the picture. Yang, they're kind of like, okay, let this token guy in. But all of these other candidates, they're shutting them down before these campaigns have made the decision to shut themselves down. How is that democracy? How is it democracy to say to a campaign, you're done because we've decided you're done based on these arbitrary polls that we've decided on? We're just not going to let you in front of the American people anymore on the debate stage. How are lower named candidates who are getting into the race, how are they supposed to get name recognition without being on the debate stage? It's a catch-22. So they're saying, well, you don't have enough name recognition to make the debates. And it's like, how do I get name recognition if I'm not in the debates? You've got Tulsi Gabbard, who was the most searched candidate both times in June and July, gaining name recognition. By the way, gaining a lot of individual donors. Large, really got the ball rolling. Lots of momentum going in her campaign. She's on the up and up. But the DNC is saying, no, we're shutting you down because you don't have enough to qualify. You don't have enough of our qualified polls to qualify for our arbitrary, with our arbitrary rules for the debates. That's what they're doing. And this is harming not just Tulsi, but every other candidate in this race. There are 11 or so other candidates in this race who, and I don't know how all of their other campaigns are doing, how maybe they're gaining steam, maybe some are not. But if they're not, they drop out on their own, like Hickenlooper. He decided just recently, look, it's over. He hung up the hat. He turned it in. Okay. That is how the democratic process should work. A candidate will naturally see whether or not their campaign is gaining steam or if their campaign is losing steam. If they're not gaining the support, if they don't see the momentum, they will shut down. They will close up shop on their own. They will make that decision because essentially the American people made that decision by no longer supporting their campaign. It wasn't because the DNC said, well, we have our arbitrary rules and you didn't meet the qualifications of our arbitrary rules, and so we've decided you're done. We've decided your campaign isn't getting enough momentum. Which is bullshit when you look at how polls are even conducted. So, can we even trust polls to give us an indication of how a campaign is doing? No, we cannot. Listen to this article that was just released from The Hill. It says right here, they're talking about the erratic behavior of polls, how Some seem, Biden's in the lead, the next Bernie's in the lead, and Warren's in the lead. And there's a massive array of outcomes with these polls. So they're not even somewhat consistent. It's not like it's kind of consistent. It's like massively inconsistent. So the Hill goes on to say here, Joe Biden has held a relatively steady lead in national polls, though an Economist YouGov poll this week found him holding just a 1-point lead over Senator Elizabeth Warren. A poll from Hill Harris X found Biden with a healthier 15-point lead over Senator Bernie Sanders, who stood in third place in the Economist poll. Warren was further behind, winning 10% support compared to 31% for Biden and 16% for Sanders. Most polls have found Biden with the lead in New Hampshire, though a Gravis poll this week put Sanders in first place. A Monmouth poll found Sanders trailing badly in Iowa behind not only Biden and Warren, but also Harris. The different signals in the polls have even experts questioning who is up, who is down, and whether the horse race surveys can be trusted. Anxiety is also growing amongst the campaigns as candidates and aides rush to highlight their incremental gains or question surveys that show them losing support. Some say the political amateurs and professionals should just give it a rest when it comes to the polls. Yeah, we would, except the DNC uses them to decide who's going to continue on and who's getting shut down. Goes, quote, "It's August of 2019. The horse race polls are absolutely worthless," said Chris Kofinas, a Democratic pollster. They're absolutely worthless, he says. Yet the DNC is using these polls as a measurement of who continues on. It says here, pollsters interviewed by The Hill defended their findings and methods, even as they warned against reading too much into their results. Even the pollsters are saying, yeah, okay, our results are good, but don't take them too seriously. Well, the DNC is taking them seriously. This is the problem, guys. Goes on to say, an Iowa starting line change research survey of Iowa drove red siren headlines this week, finding Warren jumping out to a double-digit lead with 28% support, followed by Biden at 17% and Sanders at 17%. The same poll from May found South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg with a small lead in Iowa, the only survey of the cycle to find him leading anywhere. Goes on to say the Weekly Economist YouGov poll found Warren in a statistical tie with Biden for first place nationally. That survey put Biden at 21% and Warren at 20%. The Hill Harris X survey found Warren with 10% support nationally and in third place overall. A much more dismal result than several other recent surveys. So you see they're all over the place. Pollsters attribute the different findings in various polls to the generally soft support for candidates at this early stage in the race. See, it's too early, DNC, to make a decision based on polls that are all over the place, that even pollsters are saying, don't bet your money on it. Says a Monmouth University pollster, Patrick Murray, said, talking to voters in Iowa, they will rattle off 6 or 7 names sometimes. Very few people are fully committed, he continued. They say it's difficult to focus on just one candidate, so I don't see the polls right now as predictive at all of what will happen here in February. Things will shift right up until the last minute. Many of these voters will change their minds from their first choice and have no idea who their second choice will be. The Sanders campaign has flat out rejected polls that find him losing ground, saying the surveys don't reach his young supporters or capture the activist energy around his campaign. And that is really true, because when you look at the non-certified DNC polls, they largely are the people that do better in those polls are the people who do better with younger voters, because a lot of those polls do take online samples, whereas the DNC seems to have pretty much disregarded any of the polls that do online sampling. They kind of feel like it's not indicative of the voting population, right? Okay, because how many of us actually answer the phone to take a survey? Nobody I know does. I've never taken a survey on the phone ever in my life. I have online, but I've never answered the phone and heard, you would like to take a survey? Yeah, okay, yeah. I'll take the time out of my day right now to sit here and answer a survey. Only retired people do that. So all of these polls are relying on older demographics when, and they try to get some young ones mixed in there, young ones who will answer their phone. I don't know who those people are. Meanwhile, they're basically throwing out any poll that actually gets to the younger demographic, the people who are online, and then they're saying, we're decertifying those polls. We're not going to certify them. The polls where Tulsi Gabbard did very well in, where she, the 22 polls where she actually qualified that the DNC said, no, they're not qualified polls. Those were polls that also Andrew Yang did well in, Julian Castro, Beto O'Rourke, candidates that actually appeal to a younger demographic. Those candidates did well in those polls. because they're not the traditional polls from the traditional pollsters talking to the traditional people. The Hill goes on to say here, the polling industry is still grappling with big picture challenges, such as the migration away from landlines to cell phones and the proliferation of online polls, which some view as unreliable. It's harder than ever to get likely voters to answer their cell phones and respond to survey questions, which oftentimes results in smaller sample sizes or polls of adults who are unlikely to vote in the primary. The massive field of contenders is also a challenge for pollsters, particularly when the 2% threshold to qualify for the fall debates might require a pollster to randomly stumble upon 6 individual supporters of a candidate. The Gravis Marketing Survey of New Hampshire found 8 low-polling candidates combining for 22% of the electorate, a large chunk of support that most believe will ultimately go elsewhere and fundamentally reshape the race. But let's talk about that for a second. 22% from these 8 low-polling candidates. 22% of the American electorate is going for these 8 candidates that the DNC is basically going to say don't deserve a voice on the debate stage. So they're telling nearly a quarter of America that, you know what, the issues that matter to you don't matter to us. That is what they're saying. They're saying, you know what? Oh, you like Jay Inslee's climate change message? Too bad you're not going to hear it anymore. You liked Tulsi Gabbard's regime change war message? You're definitely not going to hear that anymore, thank God. That's what they're thinking. You know, you like Marianne Williamson and her message of love and defeating hate with love? Well, you're not going to hear that anymore either. You're not going to hear any of these messages because the DNC has decided to use to select a group of arbitrary polls, which is an arbitrary, antiquated system anyway. There was a time when I believed polls were more accurate. I think that we've seen that time come and go, quite frankly. I know that there's still quite a few people who think that polls are a good indication of what people think. And that, guys, no, it's bullshit. It's not anymore because telemarketers ruined it. Nobody wants to answer their phone anymore. And with cell phones and people screening their calls, I mean, when I get a phone call on my phone from a number my phone doesn't know, it says scam likely. I'm not answering a scam. You know, I don't care if it's a poll. I'm not answering it because my phone told me it was a scam. So with all of this technology, with people moving to mobile phones, with people, I don't even know who owns a landline anymore. I talked to one person the other day with a landline and I was so surprised. What, you got a landline? Who has these? Do they even offer these anymore? Are there even actual like landline telephone lines? Polling is no longer an accurate measurement for what the American public's even thinking. We saw this in the 2016 election when Trump surprised every poll, when Trump was, according to all the polls, never going to win. And yet here we have President Trump. So I don't know who could even trust polls anymore at this point, let alone the DNC using it as the threshold of which candidates are going to be continuing. How can they possibly be doing this? How could they possibly tell Governor Steve Bullock and Governor Inslee and Senator Gillibrand and Representative Gabbard and Representative Castro that they no longer can be a part of this campaign, that they no longer can be a part of the primary, at least not getting their voices out there to the American public, because the DNC has decided arbitrarily that they're going to use these arbitrary numbers from arbitrary polls that are all over the map that even pollsters are saying are unreliable. And you know how they even conduct polls? The New York Times wrote an article on this actually a year ago, talking about how they do it. They just randomly call people. They call, if it's a statewide election, 500 people. If it's a national, poll, if it's a national poll, 1,000 people. And they just either go based on registration directories, like registered Democrats, or they just randomly call telephone numbers. And they hope somebody picks up and they say, would you like to take a survey? And you hang up on them. I mean, this is not democracy. This is not democracy. They are cutting out the messages of all of these candidates before these candidates are ready to hang it up. That is not democracy. Democracy is a candidate deciding, a campaign deciding that their candidacy is over, that they're not gaining the momentum. But if a campaign is seeing momentum and they're seeing the DNC say to them, oh, look, well, these arbitrary polls say that, ma'am, nobody knows you. You're not getting any support. And the candidate's sitting there saying, yeah, but I'm getting all of this money flooding in and all these individual donors. And when I show up to my events, I'm seeing double, triple the numbers of people showing up. My campaign is building momentum. And here we are in August. We're not even a year away from the general election. We're over a year away. And you're telling me to hang it up? You're telling me to hang it up? That's bullshit. That is not democracy. And none of these candidates should accept it. None of these candidates should just roll over and die the way the DNC wants them to, because that is what they're asking for. I mean, you got to be kidding me. Tulsi Gabbard getting above the 2% threshold in 23 of the polls, and the DNC is sitting there saying, yeah, but we're only going to count one of them. I mean, if that's not rigged, I don't know what is. That's rigged. And that is the DNC doing it all over again, sitting in their smoke-filled rooms, drinking their scotch, deciding on who you as the American voter gets to have as your candidate. You don't get to decide. They're going to decide. And right now your guy might be Andrew Yang if you're watching this. Your guy might be Bernie Sanders. But we all know how this game is going to go. They're doing it now. We're seeing it done now. They're cutting out my candidate and others' candidates, and they're going to continue to do this as time goes on. They're just setting the stage. They're letting you know that they're going to decide who gets cut based on numbers. Now, they're only going to be able to get so far with that with certain candidates. But here's the other thing. Even if a candidate is a long shot candidate, okay, even if you say, yeah, but, realistically, they don't have a shot in hell. That's not the point. The point is that democracy needs to be done by the American people, not the DNC. The point is that even if a candidate has no chance in hell, and maybe the candidate knows that, but their message is important, and their message being heard by the American people and gaining support of the American people forces the candidate who ultimately does get the nomination to add their message onto their platform. We saw it in 2016 with Bernie Sanders. Now every candidate has had to adopt his platform because it became so popular with the American people, because it was heard by everybody and agreed on by everybody, that all of these candidates have had to adopt this don't take PAC money and Medicare for all platform. That is how we make change in America. You've got to be able to hear Jay Inslee's climate change plan and like it, and then say to whoever eventually gets the nomination, hey, we like Jay Inslee's climate change plan. We want you to adopt that. We're pressuring you. How do you feel about it? Oh, you don't like it? Well, then you're dead to us. That's what's got to happen. When Americans hear, which largely they are in support of, Tulsi Gabbard's message, extremely important message of ending regime change wars, and all these other candidates are then asked about this. We're already seeing this. We saw this in the last debates when they were asked, would you pull out the troops from Afghanistan? Would you do this? When they're asked about this, her message is so important. Even if you think, oh, she'll never get the nomination, it doesn't matter. The message being heard by the American people, gaining steam by the American people, changes everything. It changes everything. Because the candidate who does get the nomination, which very well could be Tulsi Gabbard, her campaign is absolutely gaining momentum, but not if the DNC shuts her down. Oh no, they're going to put an end to that, aren't they? That message is so important for the American people to hear, that it could be forced on all the candidates to adopt. That is why what the DNC is doing by shutting down these candidates, Julian Castro, who has more of an open borders platform, okay? Now, you might not like that message. A lot of people like that message. And the more he talks about it and discusses his plans and his vision, the more that people might get on board with that. So you've got his message. You've got Gabbard's message of regime change war. You've got Inslee's message of climate change. You've got Marianne Williamson's message of love. You've got all of these different messages. Steve Bullock, his message, which is not being heard. And I know he's angry as hell about the parameters around the DNC is set out there. And Steve Bullock's whole thing is getting dark money out of politics and net neutrality. He's big on those two things. So, these are not going to be heard because the DNC has decided ultimately that they're whittling the field and you're just getting the same old, that there's going to be Sanders, Warren, and Yang on those stages with a lot of policy ideas, fighting against the establishment status quo of, let's just keep forward. We can't let those racists win. I don't have any good ideas, but it doesn't matter. You can't let racists win. Even though I don't know. Okay, who cares about ideas? Those other candidates pressure them to have ideas. And that is the big loss that we're all experiencing here with the DNC whittling this field. And every candidate that is being cut needs to get together and tell the DNC that this is not democracy. This is not what the American people will accept, that we demand that all of these candidates get their voice on those debate stages until the candidate decides they're hanging up the hat. Not the DNC, but the candidate. That has got to be what happens from here on out. So whoever you support, if you're even, now I know a lot of you are in the Yang Gang, and if he made it this time, guys, but next time he's likely to get cut. So what we've all got to do is say to the DNC and email your candidate that you support, whoever that person is, email them and tell them that they all need to band together and pressure the DNC to ensure that every candidate who is still in the race is in that debate, is making that debate stage, and that is democracy at work, and that's it. If they made it through to the first round, we want them on until they decide to close up shop on their own. That is what's got to happen. This is outrageous. The DNC is once again doing it to us. They are shutting down democracy. They're showing us that they will decide what message is important. They'll decide which candidate makes it through, and it is absolutely unacceptable. So go to work. Make this happen. There is a petition. I'm going to put down below a link. It's a petition to allow certain polls to make it, to be considered. I don't know if that'll work. It's worth a shot. You might as well put your name on it. If this petition actually picks up momentum, then you would see Castro and Gabbard on that debate stage. But ultimately, fundamentally, I think every candidate who is still in the race deserves to be heard, because that's democracy until their campaign runs out of money. And that's the way it's got to be. So start screaming about this, guys, because we need our democracy. That is what we need. Thank you so much for watching this show. If you'd like to support me, you can do so on Patreon or PayPal down below. But definitely what I'd really like you to do from this is scream at the DNC that we want our democracy. Thanks for watching.